this computer. So it is Monday, the 14th of June, 1 month before Bastille Day. We are going to talk about physical therapy math. I know I covered it in my lecture, but I wanted to hit it a little bit more in depth because I had a couple emails over the weekend about it. And like Stephanie just had some really good points about it. So I want to make sure that we kind of review that a little bit heavier, even though I'm not going to go page by page in the PowerPoint. We're going to talk about some key points and some things that can both be beneficial to you as a PTA, but also be beneficial to keep you from getting in trouble as a PTA. So that's kind of the plan today. Other than that, so the lecture before that, which, you know, my brain is drawing complete blank. What was the lecture before that? The lecture before that was the linear equations lecture. Like I said, I had a couple emails on that as well. Don't completely freak out about that. You're not going to have to plot the line in the final. You're not going to have to, you know, convert from standard to slope, slope to standard forms. You just have to know the formulas. That's what the requirements are for the actual class. So if I give you a question on your midterm or your math final, it's like, which of the following is the line slope form or the slope line form of a equation? There we go. I can speak today. I'm having problems. You just have to go down and identify which it is, right? Y equals mx plus b, or, you know, which is the standard form of line, ax plus by equals c. Those type of things. You don't have to convert. You don't have to swap. You don't have to do any of that. And then as far as that the whole slope's concerned, the main thing we're going to talk about that with is when we get to physics, one of the major responsibilities of a PTA in all of physical therapy is managing wheelchairs. Like that's our one, like, I guess you call it feather in our hat. If you ask anything to a PT about wheelchairs, they know that they can push patients around in them. That's about it. We actually do the ordering of wheelchairs. We help with organizing how to design ramps for wheelchairs and stuff like that. So we that's our wheelhouse. It's funny, we'll actually do a class where we meet with the same class that kind of you're in with the DPT students over at UNLV. And it's always funny to hear them, like what they know about wheelchairs and what they know about modalities, because it's about that much. And then you guys start talking about wheelchairs and modalities and you're like, oh, this is why we have you guys, because they just don't get it. I mean, Dr. Johnson's teaching the modalities this semester over at UNLV. God love him. They just don't, I think they get like 3 classes of modalities. You guys get a whole semester of modalities. So, you know, it's a little different when you talk about DPT versus PT. They get a lot of stuff on research, which thankfully we don't have to do a ton of stuff on research. I'm glad. It's one of the reasons I'm glad I'm not a DPT. I'm okay. Same reason I don't have a PhD is because I don't like doing research. It's just not fun for me. I like doing the work. I like actually getting hands-on with people. Even in psychology, I like being hands-on with people. All right, let me bring up that PowerPoint real quick. Who is that? Dr. O'Neill said hi. I don't know why she texted me to say hi, but she said hi. Let's get you guys brought up here, get my screen set up the way I want it set up. So the first thing that I had talked about in this lesson, and again, 3,000 foot overview level, not macro or micro level yet. We will get micro level in kinesiology. The other group is actually getting micro level in kinesiology right now, and that is goniometry, right? So goniometry is when we use one of these bad boys here, the goniometer. And what this basically is we're measuring the angles of the body, right? When I say angles of the body, it's more about the angles of the specific joints of the body. So why is this important? Well, you know, here's the deal: is in physical therapy, it used to be that we, you know, would see patients for weeks on end, and they could come to us, and like in the good old days of the early 80s and 90s, you know, they could come to us pretty much whenever they needed, and we could see them for, you know, 12 weeks for a shoulder. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is anymore. With insurances and everything else like that, we have to validate why the patient needs to keep coming to therapy. One of the ways we do that is through goniometry, because goniometry gives us an empirical measurement for which we can show improvement. If Mark comes into therapy tomorrow and says, I can't lift my shoulder the whole way, we can take a measurement of where he's at and document every visit or every other visit or whatever your clinic requires. Most clinics require every other visit, how his improvement is going or how he's not improving as well, because that's a possibility as well. I mean, he could not improve, and then we have to change our plan of care. But the idea is to show consistent improvement. And if we can show consistent improvement, where he's getting a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better, then we could show that he still has a need for physical therapy, right? If he constantly stays at, he's stuck at 90 degrees in shoulder abduction here, and he never improves, a lot of times what's going to happen is eventually the insurance is going to say that we are no longer valid because we are not improving the patient. Therefore, they're going to start denying claims. And that happens a lot more frequently than you would think. Just as an example, because we're going to talk about insurance later. As an example, I had a patient 2 years ago, so before the pandemic, I actually handed him off to another PTA who needed the hours. I've been seeing this kid since I got here, so since 2010. He has a pretty advanced muscular dystrophy. So in 2010, so he's now 17. So he would have been 10? No. Wow. He'd been like 8 in 2000, something like that. Anyway, he was young in 2010. And he was pretty early on his muscular dystrophy. And for those of you that don't know much about muscular dystrophy basically turns muscle into fat. It literally converts the myofibrils and all those fun things you're learning about anatomy into adipose. And it starts from the core and it works its way out. So it starts just basically turning all his core muscles into fat. And about 2 years ago, we realized he was going to start needing a wheelchair because he couldn't really walk anymore. And so I contacted his insurance. Yep, that is exactly it. So Mark asked, is that why they write off a patient having disability or disability? Yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about right now, actually. It's a really good point. He started needing a wheelchair. And so we contacted his insurance carrier, and his insurance carrier was Amerigroup, which is a Medicaid provider. And I said, I need a wheelchair for little Johnny. It's not his name, but we'll use this example. And they said, well, here's your options. You can either continue to have his physical therapy, or you can have a wheelchair. You can't have both. And that really confused me. I'm like, why are you saying this? And I'm like, well, because if you're putting him in a wheelchair, you're saying that he's never going to get better, and therefore you don't need to do physical therapy on him anymore. Or we can not give him a wheelchair and you can continue to see him for physical therapy. You can't have both. And to me, that's really sad. That's literally condemning that kid at that point, that he is just going to basically waste away in a wheelchair, because the point of treating a patient like that, or maybe a patient that has ALS or terminal cancer, isn't, some people do. It depends on your insurance too, Alec. That's the problem. Some insurances will cover that, right? But the problem here they're saying is because muscular dystrophy and something like ALS, which is an adult disease, are both eventually terminal, meaning that he's eventually going to have his lungs basically turned fat as well, his heart and everything like that. They're saying because I have to put him in a wheelchair now, he's not going to get any better, so we're not going to cover his therapy and kind of let him progress, which is a nice way of saying what? Let him die. And one of the things we do in physical therapy is kind of prevent that, so that they can have both a quality of life, meaning they can live as long as they can, but also have a quality of death, because if they don't get care later in their kind of terminal diseases, it's not a fun condition to die from. Something like ALS or even muscular dystrophy or some of the other diseases like spinal cord injuries, most of the patients die from pneumonia and literally drown in their own fluids. So that's kind of the sad part about this, is the insurance was basically saying, well, too bad, he's at the point now where he's not going to get any better, so we're not going to cover him anymore. Keep paying your premiums, though. So luckily, I had some connections in the community, and I got a hold of a company called Colors, which makes wheelchairs, and we were able to get him a wheelchair. We could, we could have contracted for private pay, right, Mark? But unfortunately, his parents don't have a ton of money. And we could have taken a small amount of money, but it was just as easy for me to reach out to my contacts, get him a wheelchair. We got him a wheelchair for like, the company that got the wheelchair was like $2,700, but they were contracted us for $500. And we raised money for him, got it for $500, and then we could keep doing physical therapy. I do see some patients on a cash pay, and we're going to talk about that when we get into insurance, because I'm sure that was a couple questions I got through email as well. But that's the point of kind of goniometry. It's the point of manual muscle testing. It's the point of a lot of our special tests we do, is we are just validating why we're seeing patients. And it's kind of sad, but I understand part of it is because, you know, we have to play to our least common denominator in physical therapy, meaning that we are going to have clinics that will abuse the system. We're going to have people that are just in it for money and not in it for the altruism of making people better. It's just a sad fact in healthcare, is that it's really easy to make lots of money really fast by doing fraudulent billing. So I understand where insurance companies are coming from when it comes to this, but yeah. So that's the point of goniometry. So we can measure every single joint in the body. So all our shoulder motions, all of our hip motions, all of our ankle motions, wrist motions, all of them have a standard number. And the good news for you guys, and the good news for the other cohort, is once you get to semester 3, one of your responsibilities is going to be remembering every single number for every single joint of every part of the body. The nice part about that is I give you a nice cheat sheet that gives you a nice sheet that you can look on and take to clinic with you, that has all of the measurements that you need. You need to know what the fingers are, it's on the sheet. You need to know what the shoulders are, it's on the sheet. So that you have a little reference or a quick reference guide, which helps you a little bit. But the point of this is, when we talked about goniometry, all the goniometry is going to have a fixed arm, which is what we're measuring off of, and a movement arm, which is the bone we're actually using for kind of our measurement. So like in the case of shoulder motion, right? A lot of times our fixed arm is going to be aligned with our trunk. Our motion arm is going to be aligned with our humerus, because the humerus is the part moving, right? We don't typically move the trunk and measure shoulder flexion off of that. So all of our joints of our body are going to have that. And it can be complicated to memorize this. That's why we don't hit you with this first semester, or otherwise some of you might cry on top of learning all the bone stuff, right? But that's kind of the point of the goniometry. And again, we're looking at 1,000-foot level now. We're not looking at micro level yet. So the next thing we kind of talked about in this lecture was billing and the rule of eights, which was a great question that Stephanie had earlier, right? For billing and the rule of eights, if you can learn kind of nothing else out of my math portion, if you can learn this can be really useful on your clinical rotations. Because billing and the rule of eights is kind of what we do at most clinics that are not cash pay. And even clinics that are cash pay still may use this type of billing in order to kind of back up why they're billing what they're billing. So the way basically billing and the rule of eights work, and I mentioned this briefly in the lecture, is that it says that in an hour, we're going to divide that hour up into 4 equal parts, 4 15-minute blocks. And in those 15-minute blocks, you get one-on-one unit time. So if I'm working with Mark, I can work with Mark for an hour, and I theoretically can bill 4 one-on-one units. I see Mark's got a question. I'll get to him in just a second. So they break that up that way. What's your question there, Mark?
It's probably better to ask this question after you explain it.
Okay. So they design that way so that, well, you know, back in, again, my days, way back when we started in physical therapy, people were just billing willy-nilly. And when I say willy-nilly, they would bill like 24 units for an hour's worth of treatment and say that they did therapeutic exercise, they did modalities, they did this, they did that, they did this, they did that. And, you know, one patient would end up getting a bill, you know, maybe not them, but the insurance company would end up getting a bill for thousands of dollars for an hour treatment. And it just wasn't the best way to go about doing it. So insurance carriers came down and said, well, you know, we need to come up with a better solution for this. And in steps Medicare. And Medicare is very, very rigid in the way they do things. They have a very specific way, not only for us, but for doctors, for hospitals, and for everyone, you know, even dentists if you have dental care through Medicare. And what they said is, well, we need to figure out how we're going to reimburse. So we're going to set a set reimbursement for each type of unit. And we'll talk about what units are in a second. And say, okay, well, you know what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say that the hour is divided up in 4 equal parts. But we understand that you may not always need that full 15-minute block for your full treatment. So in order to bill effectively for 1 unit of treatment, you need to hit at least over half of that 15-minute block. So you have to hit 8 minutes. And ironically, this then got kind of tied over into clocking in and clocking out too for most clinics is, in order to get paid for an extra 15 minutes, you usually have to stay for 8 full minutes. So they kind of blended that into hourly rate as well. So what they literally say here is that, if you're billing for a patient, right, your normal full-time kind of billing unit is 15 minutes. But you don't necessarily have to hit a full 15-minute time frame. They say if you hit 8 minutes out of that 15 minutes, you've got 1 unit. Now, the next question is, what is a unit? Because this doesn't make sense. This is what I got a couple emails. Well, you explained that instrument here, but you didn't really explain what a unit is. So in physical therapy, we have all of these magical codes called CPT codes, current procedural terminology codes. There's like 97010. And again, you don't have to memorize these right now. We're going to go over these in another class. 97540, 97001, 97002. And what these are all tied to is a specific thing we've done in physical therapy. Like 97010 is kind of our most common one because that's Therex, therapeutic exercise. This is manual therapy, I think, if I remember correctly. It's been a while. It's an A. There we go. So it says that if I'm working with Mark and say we spend 30 minutes together and I do, 20 minutes worth of Therex with Mark and 10 minutes worth of massage, which would be considered manual therapy. I have 30 minutes. That's 2 units. I would bill 1 of each unit. Even though that Therex is greater than 15 minutes, I didn't hit 2 units of Therex. So it's kind of when we really talk about billing in 5th semester, we're going to talk about how to kind of not finesse billing is not the word I want to use. I want to use properly bill is the better term, how to kind of maximize your units so that when you're billing, you're kind of making the most profit for your company that you possibly can. So all of these CPT, and yes, when it comes down to it, when you guys get out in the field and become real PTAs, you will kind of have to learn these, but you'll learn the ones that your clinic uses the most because some of them don't. You may not do neurological re-ed in an outpatient clinic, which is one of the specific units. You may do all Therex. You'll learn that when you get out in the field, but in a 1 hour period, the most you can bill for one-on-one time for a patient is 4 units. And when I say one-on-one time, that literally means Mark and I are spending quality time together, hanging out. He's doing his activities. I'm providing him with feedback the whole time. And this is where a lot of clinics kind of end up in trouble because a lot of them will bill, they'll have one clinician, like I just had a clinician email me because she was concerned because her clinic wants her to see 60 patients a day in an 8-hour day. And that to me is just fraudulent. She's not treating anyone if she's seeing 60 patients in a day. She's basically standing in the middle of the room being a train conductor, telling what people to do. She's not actually treating patients. And so they'll likely take all 60 of those patients and bill them 4 units for an hour of treatment, even though that PTA or PT didn't spend a one-on-one time with them. Literally, if you bill a Therex unit, 1 unit, you are saying that for that full unit, whether it's 8 minutes, which is the minimum you need to spend with the patient, or full 15 minutes, you spent that time one-on-one, uninterrupted with that patient. That's kind of literally what the rule of law states, that you are spending just quality focused time with that patient. You're not doing, working with another patient, you're not folding towels, you're not, I don't know, cleaning the hydrocollator. You're literally with that patient. Now, does that mean the patient can't do some of their exercises fairly on their own? No, absolutely. A patient can do some of their exercises on their own as long as we're providing feedback. I always find it funny when I see patients that get billed for, and I do some auditing on the side, where I see patients get billed for manual therapy and there's no manual therapy documented in the notes, but they consider like watching a patient do foam rolling manual therapy. No, manual therapy is one-on-one hands-on time with the patient, meaning your hands are on that patient, either stretching, massage, doing myofascial release, something with that patient. So we understand the first unit of the day can be either 8 minutes or it's a full 15 minutes. In order to hit 2 units, what this billing says, in order to hit 2 units, you have to fulfill your very first full 15-minute period and then complete another 8 minutes for a total of 23 minutes. So, if I'm going to use Mark just because he was the last one that talked, and that's usually what happens. If I want to bill Mark for 3 units, maybe my clinic requires me to bill every patient 3 units. I have to spend a full 15 minutes for my first unit, a full 15 minutes for my second unit, and a minimum of 8 minutes for my third unit in order to bill him for 3 units. So I have to spend a minimum of 38 minutes with him. I could spend a little bit more. I could spend full 45 and still bill 3 units with him. But the minimum I need to spend is 38 minutes. And now comes the big question, well, why did Medicare do this? Why Medicare did this was they said, look, we understand that as clinicians, we have other responsibilities on us, primarily doing documentation and cleaning up after treating a patient. So what they said is, in order to kind of provide for that buffer of doing documentation and cleaning up, if I only have to spend 38 minutes with Mark here to hit 3 units, that means I have 7 minutes of free time. And it's not free time. What Medicare is saying is you can use that 7 minutes for cleaning up after the patient. So wiping down the tables, cleaning up your ultrasound unit, putting the hot packs away, whatever it may be, and doing your documentation. The main part is the documentation. You should be able to complete a SOAP note or a full note within 7 minutes. And you will get better at that. The first time you do SOAP notes, it will take you forever. It took me forever. The first time I did a full day SOAP notes with my PT, they hated me because it took me for bloody ever to write all my SOAP notes out because it's the first time doing it. I now can easily get my SOAP notes done in about a 7-minute period, if not shorter, and it leaves me time to clean up. So that's kind of the point, is it gives you that buffer in order to complete other activities that you need to complete, whether it's documentation, whether it's printing out a home exercise program, whether it's cleaning up the room. All of those are kind of valid uses for that period. Unfortunately, clinics will look at that and go, well, you've got 7 minutes to start a new patient. And that's not always the best option there, because that can lead to burnout really quick. I know lots of clinicians in the field right now that see patients all day long and then go home and take their laptops home with them and spend an hour to 2 hours doing their documentation at home, not getting paid for it. And that leads to burnout, right? That if you're doing your work at home, that leads to burnout really quick. So Mark, what was your question? Did that clarify anything? What was your question on the billing?
Yeah, my question was, is if you're billing for 3 units, really, what I hear you saying is that clinicians will take advantage of that and just say, do work for 24 minutes, but yet bill them for 45 and then go on to another patient. That's what it sounds like they're doing.
It can happen, yeah. Now in an ethical clinic, no. So here's kind of a personal anecdote from that is, in Pennsylvania, we had that problem where people were doing stuff like that. And then Medicare came in and did a statewide audit. And magically now, or at least when I was back there, it wasn't as bad as it had been. That Medicare came in, audited, and fined a lot of companies, and then magically we got time to see patients, right? We got one-on-one time with patients. I don't know how it is now. I haven't been back there working in about 4 years, but it was kind of nice. And it seems to happen, like states get audited quite frequently. And when they get audited, kind of the shenanigans end up getting put on hold for a little while. And then they'll wait till the insurance companies stop paying attention, and the shenanigans come back out. And it's just kind of a game for some clinics. One of the clinics in town, and PowerPoint does not PowerPoint not posted, Alec? I thought it was. It's a great question. It should be in, I think, day 5. Let me double check real quick. I thought it was posted. I could be wrong. Give me a second here. Oh, I don't want to draw. Go away, drawer. Sorry, I thought it was posted. I could be wrong. Where is this class? May 21st. First content. Yeah, it's under physical therapy math. It is in, oh, it's hidden from, I'm sorry. That's my bad. There we go. I apologize. That was 100% my fault. I'm sorry, Mark. Thanks for calling me out on that. I appreciate it. Sometimes even I make mistakes. I did make it available for you. That is my bad. I can't believe no one else really emailed me about that. Or if I did, I didn't see the email. Yes, I made it available now for you. Totally wasn't a mistake. But yeah, so do clinics abuse this? For sure. What I'm trying to kind of impress upon you is be careful doing this, because be careful doing fraudulent billing, because in the case of something like that, like there's a clinic in town that did get caught for fraudulently billing Medicare patients. The clinic itself was fined $25,000 plus back charged on all of the units that they overbilled on. On top of that, each clinician was individually fined $2,500. That was PTs and PTAs. And they now have a mark on their Medicare record that they were fined. So this is kind of the dangerous path we walk when we do fraudulent billing, is that Medicare can come in and fine us, and they can even remove our ability to see Medicare patients. There's actually a doc I know really well in town who did some kind of questionable things. He's a good guy, but got caught up in the making money type idea, build some fraudulent stuff, and now is no longer ever allowed to see Medicare patients ever again. And for those of you that don't know, Medicare is probably one of our largest insurance providers in the United States. You figure it's everyone that's 65 and older for the most part. And it's also everyone that's on disability. And usually when you get kind of restricted from Medicare, then Medicaid comes in and says, well, because Medicare is so 65 and older and disability, Medicaid is people with low income, unable to pay for insurance. So they'll come in and say, well, if Medicare is going to deny you service, then so are we. And so then that clinician will no longer be able to see those patients. And that's a huge loss in revenue stream. So everyone's always kind of trying to protect their Medicare stream.
How do you call them out and still keep your job?
So that's a good thing. So that's a great question, Mark. So here's the deal, is that there is a whistleblower kind of protection in place for Medicare, meaning that if you do, and if you do report your company for fraudulent billing, they cannot take retaliatory action on you, or in theory can't take retaliatory action on you. So they can't say, Mark, I'm going to fire you because you called Medicare on us, right? That's, you're worried. But unfortunately here in Nevada, because of some shenanigans at Carson City, we are a right to work state. So what does the company do instead of retaliating on you? They will just say, well, Mark, you know what? I see Josh's hand up too, so I'll get you in a second, Josh. They will say, well, you know what, Mark, we just don't need your services anymore. And that's kind of the dirty part of this right to work state that we live in, where we used to be kind of protected a little bit. Kind of dirty. But the other thing is, and this is kind of a Medicare does provide this. Let's say, Mark, you know that your company is billing fraudulently to Medicare, and they're being really dirty about it. And Medicare comes in and audits and says, yeah, your company's billing fraudulently to the tune of X. Like there was one just recently in New York where the one physical therapist company, I'm going to use company really loosely because it was about 5 physical therapists and a couple PTAs, to the tune of $2.7 million. They fraudulently billed Medicare. The person who turned that into Medicare got 10% of that money that Medicare charged back. So they got about $200,000 from Medicare for turning their company in and getting Medicare the money back. Which, Medicare realizes that if you're going to do that, there's a likelihood, because I've talked to a Medicare audit rep about this. They're like, we understand that if Mark turns in a company, he's probably going to have to move locations, maybe move states even, in order to find another job that doesn't know about what he did. And so that's kind of why they give you that 10% kind of almost like a finder's fee is the way of looking at it. Because Medicare really encourages us to be honest. And now I'm not saying right now, Alec and Mark and everyone goes out and turns in every company that's out there. But, that does exist. What was your question, Josh?
I had a question with like the 8-minute deal. So does it have to be like, all right, 15, 15, and then 8, or could it be like a 15, 8, and 8? Or like, so what do they do after the 8 minutes you're spending with them? Is that like when you put them on ice and let them set for 10 minutes, or you give them heat and put them on 10s? Like, where does
all of that's valid, or like in the case of the inpatient world. So let's just take 2 units, for example. Let's simplify it down just a second and take it down to 2 units. So 2 units, I'm required to see a patient for 15 minutes fully to get my first unit, right? And then 8 more minutes for a total of 23 minutes to build 2 units. Does that at least make sense conceptually? Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, that's the minimum to get a second unit.
Right, now I could see them for the full 30 minutes. But a lot of times what I do is I get in, especially in the inpatient world where I'm seeing a patient in the hospital, I go in, I see them, I work hard for those 23 minutes. So I want to work for a dirty practice. I love that. And then what happens is I may put them on ice. You're right. A lot of times what I may put the patient on is their CPM unit, or I may put them on an Iceman or a game ready unit or something to that effect. And then while they're on that, I'm out doing my documentation. I can't necessarily bill for ice anymore. We're not allowed to bill for ice. We're not allowed to bill for heat anymore. So I put them on that for that time period while I'm doing documentation. And it gives me something that I feel like they're actually still getting benefit out of while I'm still doing documentation, but I can't bill for that at all. I can also just as easily see them for 23 minutes, walk out of that room and sit out at the desk and do my documentation. I'm still valid at that point, as long as I spent that full 23 minutes in one-on-one time with them. So in the outpatient world, if I saw somebody I wanted to build 3 units, like you said, now, first of all, in order to see 3 units, I have to see a full 30 minutes. I have to hit those 2 full 15-minute periods. Doesn't matter. I can't do 15, 8, and 8. I have to do 15, 15, and 8. Otherwise, I can't bill it. If I do 15, 8, and 8, then I have to add that 8 and 8 together, get 16. I've only got 31 minutes. I can only bill 2. And I have to pick what I'm going to bill out of those 2 units. I may have seen them for 3 different things, but I have to pick what I'm going to bill for, because I may not be able to bill everything. And I've done that before, where maybe I've seen them for transfers, which is physical, or it is therapeutic activities. That's one of the techniques. I've seen them for exercise, therapeutic exercise, and I've seen them for gait, where I've done gait training. But maybe I only saw them for 32 minutes. I did 3 different things with them, but I have to pick 2 of those I can bill for. And so I'll go, well, I'll bill for Therex and I'll bill for gait, and I will not worry about the transfers. And, it may seem kind of counterintuitive. I just have to kind of pick the 2 that I want to legitimately bill for. I'll document that I did everything. But I only have enough time to bill for 2 units. So it's all about a little bit of a game when it comes to that. When you're like working with patients, you kind of have to keep in your head what you're doing. And that's why when I work with patients, I have in my head exactly kind of what I want to get done each session. Now, it doesn't always happen. It falls apart a lot with kids because I can want to do 30 things and the kid wants to play baseball. Great. There goes my whole plan. So we'll do what we got to do. But, you know, it's kind of, I have my plan. I'm going to spend, you know, if I'm going to work with you for an hour, Josh, I'm going to say, okay, so I'm going to spend 53 minutes dedicated. So 3 full units, 15, 15, 15, 45, plus 8 minutes of dedicated time with you. I'm going to spend that time just one-on-one with you. And at that point, when I'm done, I can either say, okay, you're free to go. We're done treatment. They don't have to spend the full hour with me. Or I could put them on, I could put you on ice. I could put you on e-stim. I could do something like that. Because we're not even talking about, there are units that are non-timed. Like e-stim is a non-timed unit. I mean, I got to put you on that at any time in the unit and still bill 1 unit. So there are ways to get more than 4 units in an hour, but you have to do it ethically. You can't do it unethically. And so it's a challenge. And so this is kind of ground level to get the understanding of the rule. We'll kind of really expound upon this in 5th semester when we talk about the different insurance carriers. And we talk specifically about Blue Cross Blue Shield versus Medicare versus Humana or something like that, and how they do stuff. Does that make sense, Josh?
Yeah, thanks.
Yep, no problem. Mark, did you have another question? I saw you pop up for a second.
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. And again, the only thing I really want you guys to get out of this part of it for right now is just understanding the math part of it. And when I say the math part of it, if I say, you know, let's go for it, I've got a list of units here. If I ask you, you know, what do you need to do in order to get 4 units, right? You have to go, oh, well, I have to see 3 full 15-minute periods. So 3, 15, 15, 15, 45 minutes. And then add 8 minutes to that for a total of 53 minutes, like we have down here for 4 units. That's all I really need you guys to get out of it right now is just the math portion of it. Right? So this is kind of where like, becoming a good clinician comes into play, because let's say I've worked with a patient and I'm at 66 minutes. I've worked 66 minutes with that patient. I've still only got 4 units. If I spend 2 more minutes with that patient, which is not a lot of time, right? 2 minutes is nothing. I spend 2 more minutes with that patient, I can get an extra unit out of it. You know, I get to 68 minutes, right? And just kind of to show you the difference. So 53 is my base for 4, right? 68 is my base for 5. The average billable unit is about $23. So that depends upon, you know, some are more, some are less, but the average is about $23 that we get reimbursed in a clinic. So if I bill 4 units at $23 a unit, right? 12 at 92 versus 5 units, right? So I get another $23. It's 115. So I've made the clinic another $23 by spending 2 more minutes with them. Right? But now I have to balance. Well, maybe I want to spend that extra 2 minutes with Mark, but I've got Alec coming in for therapy. So I've got to kind of find a way to balance it all. And it gets to be a little bit stressful. For us, it's a little more stressful than for the PTs, because the PTs usually only have to bill most of the time for evals, which are, you know, considered hour units. But there's a lot of clinics that are now forcing PTs to even try to go, well, you know, I know you're going to bill an eval, but can you bill 3 other units along with that eval? And that's not the best idea. That can lead to get Mark going to his Medicare fraud company, right? So the main idea is just be aware of where you are, and that talks about productivity. And this is kind of what who was it I was talking to? Stephanie, I think, was talking about it. And that's productivity. Productivity is the dirty word in physical therapy. It's not fun. It's not fun to manage. And this is what leads to problems. why do we have to have productivity? Well, because I've been a director of rehab. I understand why we have productivity. I don't like it even as a director of rehab, because as a director of rehab, I've had clinicians who will work all day and see 4 patients if I don't have a productivity standard in place. And it's, I don't know what to say other than it can stem partially back to laziness or just not wanting to work. It can stem, if clinics don't pay well enough, that's obviously can happen as well. But the idea is that, in a set day, you should bill so many units in that set day in order to meet productivity standards. The hospital that I was director of rehab at here in town initially had 100% productivity standards, meaning that if you were in for 8 hours times 4 units per hour, you better have 32 units. It's all about revenue. You're right, Stephanie. You better have 32 units at the end of that day. And I came in as director of rehab and said, well, that's not reasonable, because in the hospital world, patients are sick and patients are going to refuse therapy and patients are going to be discharged. And we're going to get new patients in that are going to cause a cluster in our schedule. So 100% productivity is not always feasible. 90% is a reasonable productivity. 85 is probably the better productivity. And I tend towards, when I'm director, I tend towards wanting an 85% productivity. So, I want them to have somewhere between like 26 and 28 units in a day versus 32 in an 8-hour day. Because I think that sets a clinician at ease a little bit. So if Stephanie's working with me and she knows that she doesn't have to be 100% productive all day long, and maybe she wants to spend a little bit more time with Kayla on her total knee replacement, doesn't have to worry about an extra unit at that point. It sets her a little bit ease and she practices her therapy. And when I say practice, she really cares about her patients at that point. It doesn't care about having to get to that next patient to get those next units, right? Or her documentation gets better because she can spend a little bit more time doing her documentation and concentrating on that, which saves me from getting audited as a director. So yeah, it is all about kind of the Benjamins. It's all about that revenue. And some clinicians and some clinics take it to an extreme and some don't. If you're in a clinic that's lucky and doesn't take it to an extreme, that's kind of a good thing. It takes a lot of weight off your shoulder when you're not having a clinic that's kind of hovering over your head for productivity hours. So that's kind of what I'll say about this. And again, when we get more to you guys graduating and getting out in the clinic, we'll talk heavier about this, but that's how that rule kind of affects our clinicians. I found out that I went through this whole lecture about these timesheets here, and guess what? You guys don't have to worry about these timesheets anymore. You guys are going to have electronic timesheets for your first clinical. So you don't even have to worry about these timesheets. These are kind of the old school. We're not doing paper timesheets anymore. So I guess everything I talked about in that part of the lecture, you can just kind of ignore because we're not doing these paper timesheets anymore, which to me is freaking hilarious. I just went through this and we don't have to do this anymore. So Dr. Reskin will update you on the electronic timesheets. We don't have to do these anymore. So kind of ignore that for now. You don't have to do anything there. So I'm going to take, there's like 1 or 2 questions on your midterm about that. I'm going to take those out because you don't have to do those anymore. The electronic timesheets, I've seen them, are much nicer. Literally, it's more about just putting your time in and makes it easy. And it makes it really easy for your CIs. They don't have to sign anything. They just have to click on something. So compensation. This is one of the things, and I think Stephanie and I, again, were talking about this. When I went through school a long time ago in a land far, far away, and when I talk school, I'm talking middle school, high school, we actually had a class on this. It was business economics. And I don't know if they even have this class anymore in most high schools, unless you're maybe on a business track. But it was a required class back when I went to school to take this course. And it basically taught you about investing. It taught you about how to do your taxes, taught you about what your total combined income is. It taught you about the Internal Revenue Service. I don't think they talk about that anymore in school as much as they used to, because I think now in school they're more worried about the standardized test and getting, whatever it may be on their standardized test. But a lot of times in physical therapy, when you get an offer letter, meaning here is what you're being offered as a job, they're going to talk about total compensation. And this is something new to somebody that may have worked, purely hourly and may have not had benefits before, or may have not had this or that. Total compensation is the entirety of monies paid by your employer to you in various manners. So the most important thing to all of us is salary, right? This is by far the most important thing, because that's our cheddar. That's how we pay our bills, right? The rest of this stuff may help to our lives, but it may not necessarily pay our bills. So this is kind of a really important part to us. And unfortunately, a lot of times we focus on only that. And we ignore stuff like bonuses, vacation, sick leave, and stuff like that, because we may have stuck in our head that we want X amount of dollars. And X amount of dollars may not be feasible, right? But, maybe with bonuses it is. I've kind of helped some of the, I've done some help for a couple guys in IT that have really negotiated contracts a little bit better because of all this other stuff. In IT, a lot of this stuff is kind of common. And it's becoming more and more common in physical therapy. So salary is kind of your base pay, right? That's your hourly rate or salaried. How many of you guys would rather be hourly or salaried? So what's the difference? Well, hourly means you get paid a set amount of dollars per hour. Salaried means no matter how many hours you work in a week, you get paid X amount of dollars. Who would rather be salaried or who would rather be hourly? Does anyone have a preference?
I think it depends on how they treat you. Because if they don't really make you work that much, you could be making more money. One, they could really make you work a lot, and you really wouldn't, the hourly, it would be way low compared. So yeah, it depends on the company.
Percent. That was what I was hoping somebody would answer, right? So a lot of you are saying hourly. And I used to, here's the deal, is in physical therapy, I used to think kind of the same thing. But what I found, at least from my perspective, I'm speaking from not only a clinician standpoint, but I've done director of rehab as well, is that, even paying somebody salaried can be beneficial if you treat your clinicians properly, like Stephanie said. For example, again, I'm going to use the hospital that I managed here in town. When I came in, every clinician was set hourly. So they were paid a set rate per day or per hour, blah, blah, blah. But if my census was low, and census is how many patients I have in the hospital, I may have to send them home and they won't get paid for that hour. Or like I've had before where everyone gets discharged at noon, usually in the hospital, because that noon is where they start the next day. And so when everyone gets discharged at noon, I have to send half my staff home at noon. And that can hit your wallets pretty hard sometimes. So I said, well, what if I just made you all salaried, paid you all a fair salary? I made you salaried, paid you a fair salary. And when those things happen, if you have to go home, that's great. You're still getting paid for that full day, but understand that there might be a day later in the week where I need you to stay an extra 2 hours because we're really busy. And my clinicians really kind of warmed up to that idea. And it also gave them the ability that, maybe, and I'm a very flexible employer, that maybe if you had to go to a dentist from, 12 o'clock till 2, that you could stay from 6 to 8 and still get your full day in. So it depends. I am leaning more towards salaried in my older age, just because I like getting my full pay for the week. But it has to be, like Stephanie said, it has to be an ethical employer, because you're right. I could put everyone on salaried and then make everyone work 60 hours, right? Any of you that have ever worked in restaurant work and have ever been managers of restaurants know that's one of the first things, the tricks they do to you when you become kind of a restaurant manager is, I'm going to make you salaried, and then you're going to work 80 hours a week anyway. And then you look at your hourly rate and you're like, wow, I'm getting $2.32 an hour. This is fantastic. So it does depend. Bonuses do come into play. Some clinics will offer sign-on bonuses or tenure bonuses. I did tenure bonuses more than I did sign-on bonuses. So I would say, if Alec was getting hired by me, I'd say, So we do offer a bonus. It's $5,000. You'll get $2,500 for staying for 6 months. You'll get another $2,500 for staying for a full year. Because in this area, it's a very transient area here in Vegas, meaning that even PTs and PTAs are transient. The average time at a company is about anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So people bounce around quite a bit. And they not only here, but they may say, okay, you know what, I've had it with the heat in Vegas. I'm going to move to Oregon or something like that. And once you're licensed, you can do that. You can move state to state. It's not really that big of a deal. Other bonuses can come into play for, like I talked to Stephanie, if you meet your productivity standards and are exceeding your productivity standards while still staying ethical or not ethical in some cases, they'll give you a bonus for that as well. There's also profit sharing in the clinic, which is a huge one that I really I'm kind of partial to. I have a clinician that I know in Tucson that the whole clinic is on a profit share. So if their clinic meets a certain profit for the whole month, they all get 1% of the profit or something like that, which doesn't seem like a lot, but their last profit share check, they get paid every quarter. Their last profit share check was about $5,000. So that can be beneficial. Yes, Steph. Did you just unmute on accident?
Oh, yeah, I did. Sorry.
That's okay. I thought you might have had a question. I saw you unmute. So bonuses can be a big part of it, right? If you're getting, if you get $2,000 every quarter, right, that's $8,000 extra a year. That can help you pay some things. As I've gotten older, these are probably my two big things that I look for in a company. I don't know about many of you guys, but these are two things that I look for in a company. I want to know how much vacation I'm going to get. And then also, are they paying anything for paid sick leave or paid time off, anything like that? And I think it's just because I'm getting older and I actually like my vacations now. When I was younger, I didn't really care too much about my vacations. Now I really like my vacations and I like having to leave work and not have to do work. So these are big, right? Sometimes you'll get really good clinics that'll pay you 4 to 6 weeks of vacation. I'll take that. Sometimes you'll get some that only pay you a week. You have to kind of pay attention to that. This is the other thing, benefits and actually 401k, actually all three of these, right? So with a license, you're required to get 15 hours of what's called continuing competency units or CCUs every year. They can be online, they can be in person. So once you guys are licensed for a full year and become clinician instructors, so CIs, you actually get continuing competency units for taking students. There are all kinds of ways to earn continuing competency units. But a lot of them are going to courses, right? Going to a weekend course or going to a Friday course or something to that effect. They get expensive. The average weekend course right now is about $700. And usually a full weekend course will give you about 12 units. So you'll still come up just a little shy. And you can fill that in with other courses as well, right? If you're lucky, it might be a full 16 units. You never know. So it depends upon. But if your company says, hey, look, we're going to give you $3,000 in CCU money every year, that means you can take some pretty nice courses as long as it's applicable to your treatment, right? If I'm working in pediatrics, I can't take a geriatrics course. They kind of want me to take a pediatrics course, right? Or here, like in what I'm teaching, some of my CCUs have to be in education, right? I have to go to like test development courses or class development courses. Has to be applicable to what you're working on. But that money means that your continuing education budget no longer comes out of your own pocket. That can be huge. Benefits I'll talk about in a second before we're done for the day. And then 401k is our kind of retirement. And the reason I say that is we used to be able to rely on just our Social Security, right? I mean, when you think about it, going back to our, I guess, well, maybe your grandparents for some of you, my parents' generation, they thought that, well, I've paid into Social Security all my life. I should be able to live on my Social Security income when I retire. Maybe that used to be the case, but it's not so much anymore, right? Does anyone know what the average single person gets on Social Security for either actually combining disability with retirement? What they get per month? And again, average, not necessarily high end or low end. So the average person on, that gets a Social Security check that's retired or disabled, right, gets about $1,105 a month. So let me ask that. Could you guys live on $1,105 a month?
No.
No, right? I mean, to me, I don't know about you guys, that's close to my rent. Right? So, yay, my rent's paid, now I'm starving. So yeah, we used to be, I mean, maybe in the 70s, Social Security was able to live on, but inflation has definitely kicked in and we can't live on that anymore. So we came up with different ways to retirement, right? There's retirement, there's 401k, there's 403bs, 403cs, there's all kinds of fun stuff like that that exist out there. IRAs, Roth IRAs, I've had to learn all of that through my time. I actually used to sell IRAs and Roth IRAs, so I understand them a little bit. The 401k is big because 401k, oftentimes you put in some money, right? And then your employer will match it. So at one of the clinics that I worked at here in town, the employer would match 100%, meaning if I put in $50, he'd put in $50. They would match 100% up to 10% of my income. So if I put 10% of my paycheck into 401k every week, or every pay, he would match that 100%. So he would put another 10% in. I'd get 20% of my pay in my 401k. That's cool, right? That means that my 401k is constantly going up, even if the stock market doesn't do so great. And I think we've all learned over the past couple years, like since what, 2000, probably 2 to 2004 till now, we can't 100% trust in the stock market. I think we've realized that, right? I don't know about you guys, but man, when that stock market crash happened right before, what was that, 2004 or whatever, man, that killed my 401k a little bit. Yeah. 1929 too, yeah, exactly, right? We've learned that we can't always 100% trust that type of stuff. So we have to have diversified income, right? It's just kind of the way it is. And we can talk all day. I could talk all day about diversifying income in different streams and the volatile cryptocurrency market and gold and silver, and we're not even going to go in there. But 401k is kind of a nice benefit that most employers offer. If you're in the school district, sometimes there's different 403s as well, because schools work a little differently than just your average or ordinary 401k. There are some companies that offer a retirement plan as well, right? Those are old school plans. Not many companies offer retirement anymore. It used to be that, my dad worked for Teamsters all his life, whether it was being a heavy equipment driver or driving tractor-trailer truck, he worked the whole time through Teamsters, and they had a retirement plan for him, and he got a really decent pension when he retired, right? Some of you guys might have done military service and may have stayed in for the full bill in order to get your retirement for the military. That's also a possibility as well. So, retirement can come into play later on in life and help you kind of survive when you get older. And, our life expectancy, you got to figure it out. Life expectancy for ladies is about 86 years. For men, it's about 80. You're going to retire at 65. So you're going to have a couple years where you have to come up with income on your own. Right? I'm planning on just burning out at about 55 and not having to worry. I'm not joking. I'm not talking about that. But all this comes into play. Yeah, Mark.
There's continuing education. Does that translate into additional income in regards to like maybe specialties or specialty services at some PT clinics?
It can, absolutely. Yeah. For example, I'm going to use Dr. O'Neill as an example. Dr. O'Neill is cardiac and geriatric specialized, right? So she has her specialization in cardiac and geriatrics. So yeah, absolutely. Especially if she's going to work at a hospital that does a lot of heart surgeries, it can translate into her getting a bigger pay. PTAs can too. PTAs can specialize in pediatrics and cardiatrics. I almost said cardiac and geriatrics and vestibular, and it can translate into more money. It usually doesn't translate immediately, right? So Mark, if you got specialized tomorrow in vestibular, usually you don't immediately get it, but as your next review, it usually does translate into a bigger kind of raise at that point, because now they can advertise you as being vestibular specialized, right? And so it attracts more patients into you. If you're a specialized hand therapist, there's not a lot of PTAs that do hand therapy. Definitely a draw for certain clinics that need hand therapists, because PTs can only do so much because they're doing so many evals. If they have a hand PTA specialized in hand therapy, that really is a benefit to them, for sure. I've chosen not to specialize in anything, mainly because the one thing I would specialize is in pediatrics. And pediatrics has really weird rules that I cannot treat an adult while I'm getting my pediatric specialization. So that kind of shot that for me. But they're not all like that. Most of them are just requiring you to take continuing ed courses and then eventually take a test, kind of like your boards. Wound certifications, another big one. We can become what's called a CWSA, a Certified Wound Specialist Assistant, where you do wound therapy on patients with the PT's kind of eval and stuff like that. So yeah, there's all kinds of specializations you can do that can definitely offer your income. You can also, continue education, maybe get a bachelor's or a master's in business administration, and that can benefit your clinic. I've known a lot of PTAs that have gone on to get their MBA so they can run a clinic. Right? We actually have an adjunct faculty member who comes in and helps us with labs, Mr. Gersh, who is a PTA for one of the companies in town. And he's got an advanced degree so that he can run a clinic. He's running one of the big clinics here in town. He's a PTA. Absolutely. There are ways that as a PTA, you can make more money, for sure. Just don't teach. You won't make money. I'm just joking. Not kind of. You guys will graduate and make more than me. I'm just saying. But you have to kind of love what you're doing as well.
I have a question. Do you provide or will you provide a list of those resources for later?
You mean as in what? Do you mean resources? I'm sorry. I'm doing
for like if you want to get a specialty, like
yeah. And we'll actually bring in a couple companies that offer like continuing education degrees if you want that towards fifth semester, that you can talk to them if you want. We don't force, again, we're not going to force you on anything. Please don't think those are that for that at all. Just if you want to ask questions. And yeah, we'll talk about the different APTA certifications in fifth semester for sure.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah. I don't want to overwhelm you with that right now when you're not even at the license point, right?
No, it's just nice to know that there's if you're new, there's like a list that you can look at what would interest you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And again, it's not all about salary either. It can be about your setting your caseload, total compensation, travel time. I do a lot of home health, which a lot of people are like, I want to do home health because I know you can make money in it. Because you can. Home health, you can make bank 100%. Because home health, your income is just limited by how many patients you want to see in a day and how many patients your office will give you. But I spend a ton of time on the road when I'm doing home health, and that can burn you out. Like I spend a ton of time driving around the valley, and it's so fun to drive around the valley. Let me tell you, the roads are just perfect. There's never any traffic. Yeah, it's fun, right? So yeah, depending upon where you want to work, you can make some serious money. You can work at a cash pay clinic where all the patients are paying cash, and sometimes that pays a little bit more. There are different things out there to do that. For myself, I wanted to work in pediatrics. And I had to understand coming out of school that if I wanted to work in pediatrics, I wasn't going to be the best paid PTA. They don't pay well in pediatrics. You really have to kind of do it because you love working with kids. Just because in pediatrics, insurance doesn't reimburse very well. Remember I said that $23 is the average reimbursement per unit? For a kid, the average reimbursement is $7.10. So even if you saw a kid for 4 units, in the clinic, the max you're going to get is about $28 reimbursement. And that's why a lot of clinics don't open for pediatrics, is because they're just not going to make the money and be able to sustain a viable clinic. And I could go into a diatribe about why that is, but it just kind of, I don't know, kind of makes me sad that we don't think more about our future generations.
So what, the majority of pediatrics are in hospitals?
Well, not really. There's about 5 clinics in town that treat only pediatric kids outpatient. So you can do both. You can do home health. Actually, the company I work for, I did pediatrics home health. I just did cash pay. It was a PTA and I that worked together on that. So, I mean, they're everywhere, but yeah, I mean, inpatient's a good place to work with them, but I'd say there's more outpatient than there is inpatient because there's only really, there's only really 2 hospitals in town that have a pure pediatric wing. I mean, like Summerlin has some pediatrics, Mountain View has some pediatrics, but you're talking more like Sunrise and UMC that have pure pediatrics. Yes, absolutely. So Jadine asks, is it possible to be placed in a clinic specialized in something? Absolutely. We have all kinds of clinics that, you know, specifically in this area, the big one we have access to are clinics that do wound care and clinics that do vestibular training, because we have an aging population in Vegas, right? We're one of the leading retirement communities in the United States, along with Phoenix and Florida. But, you know, we won't talk about Florida. Just kidding. So yeah, we have, I mean, I know we have a bunch of vestibular clinics. We have, and rehab even is a specialization where you're working with patients that are getting rehabilitated to return home. So sure, there's all kinds of clinics out there that we have specializations in. Then there are general clinics, right? Like say Josh wanted to say, hey, I wanted to kind of see everything. Well, we have a clinic down in, I know specifically in Pahrump, that is kind of out in the boondocks. Obviously, Pahrum's a little bit out in the boondocks, right? But because they're out in the boondocks, they see everything. Literally, they see everything from pediatrics to geriatrics, from wound care to vestibular, because they're the only game in town out there. Or Mesquite's another area where we've got some that you know, there's not a lot of game in town up there. So those clinics see everything. So yeah, we have a bunch of clinics that do a little bit of everything. So I went through all this compensation. I'm not going to read through it. It's kind of there for you. Insurance, we will go through in semester 5 in depth. The one thing I want to stress here for you guys is be careful when talking to your patients about insurance. And I'm speaking from experience because I understand insurance and I tend to try to explain things to patients. And then if you say something to a patient, they will hold it to you as gospel. Meaning if you say that their copay is only going to be $55 and their copay actually turns out to be $56.10, they're going to come back on you and say, well, you know what? You said my copay, JT, is only going to be X amount of dollars. And so that can be problematic. So just be careful what you say. I always talk in generalizations. I talk about insurance, but I'll say, well, your copay is 25% of the office visit, or whatever it is, or I'll refer them to the front desk, because the front desk are the people that should really be handling those questions, because they're the ones that are going to be billing the patient and handling stuff like that, or the office manager if you have one. Just be careful when you say stuff or quote anything to patients, because a lot of times it will come back to kind of bite you in the rear end there. But again, insurance, the main thing I want you to understand about insurance is understanding kind of these definitions. So understanding what a UCR is, understanding what the cost is, the deductible, because all of those will come into play not only for your patients, but for yourself. And I don't know about you guys, but this was one area that I didn't get any schooling on. And when I grew up, you know, I think some of you are at least in the range of my age. When I grew up, you know, and I went to doctor or something like that as a kid, my insurance just covered it. I didn't really, I mean, I don't know what my parents paid for a copay or a co-insurance, or even if they had it. But my insurance, for the most part, when I was a kid growing up, just covered what I had. If I broke a bone, they covered that. I don't remember my parents worrying about us going bankrupt because, you know, I had to have stitches. But nowadays, that's reality, right? I mean, with the average American family not being able to handle a $500 expenditure that is unexpected, yeah, you go to the hospital one time and get a $500 copay, that can hurt. So just understand kind of what these terms are importantly, because it will come into play for your own, right? We all want to have good insurance, but we also want to make sure that our insurance covers what we need. My insurance requirements might be different than Josh's insurance requirements, just because I saw his name. And again, sometimes it's just whoever I see. Right. So TRICARE. TRICARE is great, right? TRICARE is honestly a good insurance, but it is kind of confusing. Right. And then, like Steph said, once you worked in dental, you started understanding. And that's kind of when I started understanding it too, when I started understanding is when my wife got sick. And I started looking at the bills I was getting and trying to break them down and playing the insurance phone call tag to get them to cover stuff. Then I understood a lot more about what insurance was and why they were covering stuff and why they didn't cover stuff. And I still to this day sometimes don't understand why they don't cover stuff. Insurance has gotten a little bit better now that pre-existing conditions are now no longer allowed to be denied. For example, for myself, I've got a PFO, which is patent foramen ovale. When I was coming up through work in the IT world, none of my healthcare for my heart was covered because it was considered a pre-existing condition that was I had at birth. It was, a congenital condition, and said, well, insurance is going to pay for congenital condition. You should talk to the person that gave you that congenital condition to pay for it. I'm joking. I actually had an insurance person tell me that. They're like, go talk to your mom. She gave you the congenital condition. Now those are covered, right? Those are kind of important. So insurance costs have gone up, and we could have a debate here for hours, I'm sure, about why insurance costs have gone up. But in reality, if you really want to look at why insurance costs have gone up, look at who's making the money off insurance, and that kind of tells you why insurance costs have gone up. It's just the way it is. A lot of people like to blame healthcare for that, but in reality, when you look at it, it's not healthcare that's driving insurance costs up, because really our rates haven't gone up a ton for the past 10 years as much as insurance rates have. When I graduated back in 2007, I started working in 2007. Yeah, so graduated in 2007 in PT. It was about $22.45 per unit, and we're now at $23.10. So honestly, physical therapy costs haven't gone up that much, but insurance rates sure have. Are there any questions on insurance that you guys don't understand that I might answer real quick before we kind of wrap up for the day? Did everyone kind of get a chance? Well, if you get a chance to read through this, I'm sorry I didn't make this available. I appreciate Alec calling me out on that, because sometimes even I make mistakes. I should have probably unlocked it this weekend, but my brain was on hiking trails in Pine, and it was beautiful and it was quiet. And I saw lots of deer people. There are lots of deer people on the mountain. It was great. Deer people are great things. They're quiet.
We just do math like this from now on?
You mean for this is it for math, actually. We're actually wrapping up the math class right now.
Or
So this is, I'm going to go out of this lecture here so I can go to full screen. This is actually our official last math lecture, math, right? So what we have on the docket from now on, right? So let me bring up my schedule here real quick. I believe we have a review class coming up. We're just going to kind of talk through semester 13 schedule. Yeah, so we've gone through all of the stuff that we've had to do. We're actually ahead by one class now that I look at it, which is actually kind of cool. So what we'll do is we'll actually review, and I'm going to give you a hint. So next class is Dr. Johnson's asynchronous class. So I'll put up some stuff for you to review for that. And then we meet one more time in person, which is next Monday, right, the 21st. We will do a full-on review for the midterm. And what I'm going to suggest is when we do the full-on midterm, pay attention to the full-on midterm review. Wink, 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 nudge, nudge, Bob's your uncle. Just saying. I don't know how much more explicit I can be there. Right? And then I'll open the review up for you. So that will then be next Wednesday, your final midterm is. That will be asynchronous, meaning you won't have to come to class to do the midterm. You'll have to come to school. I think you have lab with Dr. J anyway. I would open it at the end of next Monday. I'll open the midterm up the end of next Monday. You'll have a week to complete the midterm. It's not timed. It's 60 questions. It's some basic math stuff, right? But we'll review it. And so that'll give you a full week to complete that. And then we're getting into physics. And out of all of the things I hear people, Mark and I have talked, we've worked a little bit together, right? Out of all the things, I'll say that most people hate physics the most. And Stephanie's nodding her head, right? And again, I will attempt, facts, Alex. I will attempt to make physics as simple as I have made this. What you need to know, what I have to cover for the DOE, right? I still have stuff I have to cover for the DOE. That's just the Department of Education. But I will also make it applicable to physical therapy. So when we talk about Newton's laws, we're going to talk about them in relation to physical therapy and how they come into play in it, because we will actually talk about them again in kinesiology, believe it or not. So they do come into play. So we've got basically, this is the last lecture. And I wish I would have put it up before now, but it's up now for you guys. Oh, I never make mistakes. So we'll have 2 more classes. Basically, we'll have one asynchronous where I'm going to do kind of a review, and it's got to be a really brief one. So that asynchronous class is not going to be very long. The major review is going to be next Monday. We'll do the review, open the midterm. You'll have a full week to do the midterm, and then starting the following Monday, we start in physics. Any questions I can answer? I'm going to stop recording because that's